I bought the Olympus MJU II back in 2021, and for years I thought this camera was unbeatable. But I might have been wrong. First, a bit about the camera itself. It was released in 1997 and also known as the Stylus Epic in the US. It has a fixed 35mm f2.8 lens, and the clamshell design, it protects the lens and it helps it slip into your pocket, basically any pocket because it's that small. It goes up to shutter speeds from 1,000th of a second, which is really pretty fast for a little point and shoot, all the way down to 4 seconds. It reads DX-coded film from ISO 50 up to 3200, and it runs on a CR123A battery, which is still widely available today. And yes, it is weather resistant, so you don't have to panic if you run into a little bit of rain, but I still do because this camera is almost 30 years old. Let's start with what the camera does really well. It's the design, everything that I just mentioned before, the tiny size, the clamshell that protects the lens, and the fact that you don't have to press any buttons to start it, just open the clamshell and you start shooting. It's perfect. It's the perfect point and shoot. And beyond the functional design, it just looks great. It's that unmistakable late 90s design language that to me is kind of nostalgic because I'm that old, but at the same time very timeless. It still looks very good today. I love it. Besides that instant shooting experience that the design offers, I also just really like the feel of the camera, especially the shutter button. It has a really intuitive and satisfying half-press click to it that you usually don't find on these types of point-and-shoot cameras, especially from the 90s. I like that the lens is an f2.8. It gives you a bit more flexibility when it comes to different lighting situations. And overall, it is sharp enough, it's nice and contrasty, and it delivers great results in a wide range of real-world situations. Here are a few examples of different lighting situations that I think show the flexibility of that f2.8 lens quite nicely. So the exposure metering of the MJU II is generally spot on. Whether I'm shooting in daylight or slightly more challenging situations, I rarely get completely unusable frames. What I have noticed is that it tends to lean a bit to underexposure in high contrast situations. This means that it does a great job of preserving the highlights, but you might lose some detail in the shadows. To get a better picture of this, you might want to check out my full video comparison between the Yashica T4 and the Ricoh R1. The T4 does it way better and the Ricoh does it a bit worse. So you get a nice sort of gradient of how these cameras perform. Now let's talk about some of the things that I don't really like about it. And first, it's the infamous flash reset. Every time you turn the camera off, the flash defaults back to auto, to flash on usually. And yes, that is quite annoying. But complaining about it is kind of like yelling at a VHS player that it doesn't stream Stranger Things. So while it is a gripe, it's not exactly a unique one because basically every 90s point and shoot has this feature. Having said that, that flash button on the MJU II is minuscule. My finger is literally 4 times the size of the flash button, and it needs 2 clicks. So the downside of such a small camera is that the viewfinder is also tiny, and I'll be honest, I often have trouble finding it intuitively with my eye. Now that might be because I shoot with a lot of different cameras, so my muscle memory never really quite kicks in, but still, it's not the most user-friendly experience. So the autofocus is pretty reliable. It's just not flawless, especially up close, especially with portraits. It's just a bit of a lottery when it comes to taking pictures of people who are sat at your table or something, which, to be honest, is how this camera is often used. And that was something I knew because I used this camera for quite a few years and I did miss quite a few shots. But comparing it side by side with the T4 and the R1, it really confirmed that that is a weak point of this camera. The MJU II's popularity has really driven prices through the roof. You're now looking at anything from 250 to 400 plus US dollars or euros, depending on the condition, of course. But I've seen clean boxed examples go for over 500 euros. Now finally, I'll score the MJU II on the G.A.S meter. That is my very own unscientific camera rating system to help you decide whether this camera should be added to your unnecessarily large camera collection ASAP. Well, I'd rate the MJU II a solid 7 out of 10. Close to an 8, to be honest. It's fast, it's fun to shoot with, and it delivers pleasing, well-exposed, yet somewhat soft and sometimes out-of-focus images. If I lost it tomorrow, or if it dies tomorrow, I probably wouldn't rush to pay the current prices for another one. There are plenty of cameras out there that give you 90% or 110% of this experience, of the MJU II experience, for half the price, like the Ricoh R1. Talking about alternatives, you could consider the very popular Yashica T4. I compared this one, both of these, side by side, and I must say the Yashica is a slightly better camera. It has a slightly better lens, slightly better autofocus, maybe a watt better autofocus, but it's significantly uglier, and it's also a bit more expensive. Then there's the previously mentioned Ricoh R1. Honestly, that's a bit of a sleeper in my opinion. I think that's a great little camera with a more ergonomic design because it has a nice grip. It has a sharper lens, 30mm, but it is a bit sharper. And it has an actual 24mm wide lens built in this panorama mode. It's just a bit more creaky. You can, of course, also opt for the MJU I, the original, if you want to save a buck, but I found the autofocus on the MJU I to be even less reliable than on the MJU II. And finally, perhaps my all-time favorite compact 90s point-and-shoot, the Olympus AF1 Mini. Also quite ugly, but it's fantastic. All right, that's the Olympus MJU II. It's a classic for a reason, but it's not without its quirks or flaws. If you have any hot tips from me about using this camera, because, you know, some of it might be user error, or your own love-hate relationship with the camera, drop them in the comments. If you want to see how the Yashica T4 or the Ricoh R1 stack up against it, click somewhere on your screen. And that's it. Like, subscribe. See you in the next one.